Today we're going to talk about career planning while using your M code. And whether you're just getting started or you're making an adjustment inside an organization or you're pivoting completely to a different role, what we want is for you to find work that truly energizes you, work that isn't burning you out and draining you. And that's where M code comes in. When you look at your report, your top 5 motivations and your primary dimensions, along with your motivational flow, offer powerful clues about how and what kind of work you want to do so that you will naturally thrive. So let's talk about dimensions and motivational flow. On the screen, you're going to see for achievers how we think about where you thrive. It'll say achievers thrive in competitive, results-oriented environments where individual excellence is recognized. Consider sales, entrepreneurship, athletics, or performance-based role. Now, I'm not saying you specifically have to do this. I'm saying this is where most achievers find strength, energy, and activities that don't drain them. What about drivers? Drivers excel in fast-paced environments with clear goals and challenges to overcome. Look at project management, emergency services, startups, and turnaround situations. Influencers find satisfaction, deep satisfaction, in roles where they can persuade, impact, and develop others. Explore marketing, training, coaching, sales leadership, or advocacy work. Learners are energized by acquiring and sharing knowledge. Consider research, academia, technical writing, consulting, or specialized expertise roles where domain knowledge is super valuable. Optimizers love improving systems and processes. So look at quality improvement, operations, engineering, or analyst positions. Orchestrators excel at organizing people and resources. So look at program management, operations leadership, or executive roles. Relators are fulfilled by teamwork and meaningful connections. So take a look at HR, teaching, healthcare, customer success, or community management. And lastly, visionaries. They're motivated by creativity and future possibilities. So consider product development, strategy, creative fields, or innovation roles. Now, we have a whole nother webinar on motivational flow about how to onboard your best self. That comes from understanding prompt, process, and payoff. So we ask ourselves, what typically drives me to get involved in a project when I'm at my best? How do I tackle challenges? And in payoff, what makes me feel most satisfied when a project is complete? When you understand your dimension and you understand your motivational flow, you have a pretty serious advance or head start on figuring out what work is best for you. But now I want to take you into the next effort that helps you, and that's reviewing job descriptions. When we talk about reviewing job descriptions, what we're really talking about is how to take this M code, which feels like it's an abstract report, and make it super practical, right? So how do you make your M code report practical when it comes to job stuff? Make a motivational keyword list. So let's say that I'm motivated by Excel. That's one of our motivations, and that's one of my top ones. Then I would write words like high performance, excellence, best in class, competitive, exceed. Well, if I put all those words in a little list, then as I'm looking through a job description, I can see if they've naturally used any of the terms that I care about that are reflective of who I am and how I'm motivated in the job description. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that keyword list to scan for job descriptions. Now, I'm going to put in terms, and instead of always putting in the job title or what we presume will be the job title, instead by putting in these other terms, I'm going to start finding jobs and I go, oh my gosh, that's named a little different than I would have named it, but the description is perfect. Pay special attention to responsibilities, qualifications, and company culture. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to look for red flags. I want to flag misalignments. If I'm a visionary and all of a sudden I read strictly follow established protocols, I'm like, that's not good for me. If I'm a driver and it says maintain current operations, I'll be like, no. I was once invited to apply for a job that was described by the CEO as keep all the trains running and maybe get some improvement 2 or 3% per year. And I was like, wow, you couldn't have described a worse job for me. I'm sure there are other people that would be great in that job, but that's a huge red flag for me. That's not going to fit with how I'm wired and how I'm shaped to do the work that I love doing. What you want to do is take a look at jobs that have significant draining opportunities. We've talked about flow. We've talked about your particular stack rank of your dimension, your top motivations. And when you look at that stack rank and you look at the bottom, the red area, we're talking about motivations that aren't your top ones, but they may even, when you spend too much time there, they may drain you. So take a look at jobs that have too much alignment with the bottom of your stack rank of motivations, and you will be removing jobs that are predominantly draining. Now, you find a couple of jobs, you find some things that fit there. What are you likely going to do next? You're going to interview. So how do we prepare for interviews? The first thing I want you to do is I want you to develop for your dimension questions that will help you determine if the job's going to be a good fit. So if you're an achiever, you're going to ask, how is excellence recognized and rewarded here? For a driver, can you describe the pace of work and typical timelines for projects? For an influencer, how much opportunity will I have to shape decisions or mentor others? And for a learner, what learning and development opportunities exist in this role? These questions for those 4 dimensions are going to help set the stage for a conversation where you're articulating, just by the nature of the question, what you care about, and they're able to respond by either allaying your fears and saying, yeah, this is a great fit for that, that kind of question. Or they'll say, no, that's not really how we work. Take a look at the other 4 dimensions. The optimizer's question, how does the team approach process improvement? For an orchestrator, could you describe how projects are typically structured and managed? For a relator, how collaborative is the team culture? And for a visionary, how does the company approach innovation and new ideas? Now you can imagine if you're a visionary and you ask that question and you're asking it to a family-run business that's been in business for 120 years and their website even says, we do things the way we've always done them, that's how we ensure quality. If you're a visionary and you're asking, hey, how do you approach innovation and new ideas? And they're like, we don't. You'll know pretty quickly, this may be a great job, but not a great job for you. Now, the next piece is to articulate your best context. And I got to tell you a story. One of my coworkers had her daughter take the M-Code assessment. And then it was the summer between junior and senior year, and she had to have an internship. So she was applying and she had like 7 or 8 interviews for internships. Now, if you have a college student or you have a recently graduated college student, you know that even if you have 7 interviews, you likely only get 1 offer. But this woman got 7 out of 7 offers. She got them all. Why? Because instead of answering the most common question of what is your strength or what is your weakness, she said, I think what you really mean is in what context will I thrive and in what context will I not be able to deliver my best? By reshaping the question to the context rather than strength or weakness, she was able to get to the heart of what they were looking for, but she was also able to put herself in best light. Your M-Code report has your top 5 motivations, and in each one of those parts of the report, it shows you context where you will thrive and context that will drain you. And so if you study and read that, you will be prepared in an interview, just like our friend Natalie did, to say, hey, here's the context where I will thrive, and here's where I won't. And the organization can listen to that and realize that is brilliant. In fact, every single person who interviewed her said, I can't believe how self-aware you are. Let me tell you, right? If she can get 7 out of 7 interviews turned into jobs, you can too. But it starts with self-awareness. And that's where M-Code gives you the ability to understand what contexts are best for you. When you focus on work context, when you focus on that rather than just job duties, you're moving away from the skills dynamic, you're moving away from the experience dynamic, and you're moving into that deeper insight where you get to bring your best energy to the table. That's powerful for you and for the organization that's hiring you. So let's shift from looking at job descriptions and job interviews to career strategies. And I want to look at a couple that are really, really powerful. And the first is role shaping. Role shaping means you don't need to go get a new boss, a new job, even work for a new company. You can do it right where you're sitting, because it means take a look at my current role and let me just start adjusting it so it works better for who I am. Take a look at this 6-step process. First, I want to conduct a motivational audit. What in my job is making me feel more energetic? What in my job is draining me? We get into those details in our motivational flow and in our energy webinars that you should check out. But doing a motivational audit helps you understand, okay, from your current job to your perfect job, how close are you? Or how much work do you need to tweak? Then identify expansion opportunities. Where are the areas where I can push in, grow, make this a bigger part of my job? There may be a place where you're doing some portion that you love, but it represents 10% of your job. How do you take that and turn it into 20 or even 30% of your job? Then you got to build the business case. You build the business case by talking to your boss and saying, I hope you've noticed, right, that I am good at this. And in fact, I deliver great results and I do it quickly because I bring all my energy to that. And I'm wondering if I could also do this and this, right? If I can extend that effort into these other areas, because I think that will allow me to deliver my best for the team and for the organization. When you build that business case, the person on the other side of the table, regardless of whether they're a great boss or they're just a mediocre boss, who doesn't want you at your best? Who doesn't want you bringing more energy to the table? Now, you're likely going to say, I want more of this, and also I want to change my compensation. Don't do that. First, deliver, right? First, showcase all the stuff you're doing that improves and delivers benefit to the organization, and then circle back to negotiate incrementally. If you're working for a great boss, you won't even have to get to that part because they will be like, you've done more stuff, now let's compensate you. Now, step 5, there are some things, while you're expanding parts of your job, there are a couple other parts of your job that aren't great for you. So start looking for the opportunities to create motivation exchanges. Motivation exchanges are where I say, hey, to one of my colleagues, I think you would do this better and I would like to take this on, right? And we start swapping stuff. The work has to get done, but we can make little swaps of little things. I'm not talking about wholesale big parts of the job, but if you can make these little bits, maybe it's 5% of your job that drains you, but if you can pass that 5% to someone else and take on 5% that drains them, that fuels you, both of you are going to get better and the entire org benefits. Lastly, step 6, document the results. Demonstrate that what you just did so much better. Now, what about the other strategy, which is a lateral move? Sometimes you just got to move out of one department into another, and they create the opportunity to keep your institutional knowledge while also creating a better motivational fit. So what are the steps there? Number 1, map the organization. No one else is going to do this for you. But if you start looking at the org and going, here's where they're doing this, and there's more drivers over here, there's more learners over here, I'm the odd duck over here that probably should be over here. Map the organization, and step 2, start building cross-departmental relationships. Start building relationships with other people that are maybe better fits, complementary fits, more like you in other parts of the org. Then start acquiring bridge skills. I worked in an organization where Seth was in one group and Andrea was in another group, and it made a lot more sense to move Seth into that group, but there were things that Seth needed to learn from Andrea. So what does Seth do? He starts meeting with Andrea and starts developing some new capacities. Once they got to the right place, they were able to then create visibility, step number 4, for Seth to say, hey, I also can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. And that made it way more clear that he was a compelling candidate for a lateral move. Number 5, approach it as an internal candidate. When an opening showed up in Andrea's face, Seth could put in his resume, and everyone thought, no, but Seth, you're an analyst, right? If you're an analyst, why would you want this job in marketing communications? And he was able to say, no, here are the other ways that I've demonstrated that skill. And Andrea could say, yes, these are the other ways. And boom, you move over. Lastly, an organization may not be ready to hire you. They may not be ready to do a full lateral move. You may bring a whole bunch of value to the org and the team that you're in right now. So consider trial period. Consider a loan program. Hey, we're going to loan this person to that group over there for a month or for 20% of their time. But that kind of trial period allows you to demonstrate a better fit than where you currently are and impress everybody else so they go, oh gosh, we need that person over here full time. Okay, and the last strategy here when we're talking about your career is the more extreme one, which is the career pivot. And the pivot says, hey, listen, my current job fundamentally is not aligned with who I am. And I need to make a big pivot so that I can transition into a different role or a different industry that better matches my pattern. So what do we do there? Start small. I got to just caution you because you're in a current job, you're doing work, and it doesn't fit you perfectly, but you don't want to jump off a diving board saying, I'm done with this job, I'm out of here, only to discover the pool has no water. That would be a painful transition. So the first thing to do, motivation-based career research. Now, we started this webinar by walking you through 8 different dimensions and the kinds of jobs that are more inclined towards a motivational match. So take a look at that list and you might say, oh, I'm in the wrong area for this dimension. And you start looking at other jobs that may be a better fit. Then what you want to do in step 2 is identify the transferable skills. What are the skills you're bringing to the current job that allow you to apply the same skills somewhere else? I worked with a woman who worked for U.S. Sailing. U.S. Sailing, she was, in the Northeast, and everything she was doing was building relationships with vendors and doing big events and doing fundraising. And she's doing all this work. She's marketing stuff, but it is in a very old school boys marine industry, right? Boaters and high performance sailors and all that stuff. And she says, Chris, I would like to shift my entire career to work in tech. And she wanted a job in tech. And I said, well, this is many years ago, but I said, I think the company that would be most inclined to being able to identify your transferable skills is a company like Microsoft. So at the time, we rewrote her resume to identify transferable skills. We then put it on Monster with like 11 million more resumes. But lo and behold, Microsoft read it, saw it, called her in for an interview, and she's been working there ever since. Number 3, develop a transition narrative. What she was able to do is say, here's what I bring to the table and here's what I do, but I want to work in a more innovative space. I want to work in a place that's constantly learning and growing. And so people could see, well, that's probably not sailing and it definitely is technology. So they understood the transition and narrative. Now, step 4 is close skill gaps strategically. If there are things you don't know, you're going to need to fill it in. When I was working with that gal to move her from U.S. Sailing to Microsoft, I flew out 2 different times to Long Beach in Southern California, and we spent a week at a time working through the parts that she would need to understand in this new tech space that she didn't have to deal with over there. She picked it up really quick and it was awesome. Step 5, build a new network. Make sure that you are building a set of relationships that will help you. And number 6, if you can't get the full perfect job, of course, my friend was able to get hired by Microsoft in a marketing role. But if you can't, consider bridge jobs. So what's the next best job? And then how might you use that to transition into the job that you want? And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, start small. Career pivots have a lot of places where you might mess up. So you want to go slow, you want to be careful, you want a support network to help you. But there is nothing more wonderful than putting yourself into a job that aligns with your motivational patterns because it brings you energy every single day. Your uniqueness, which we know from your motivation code, your uniqueness is so important that it ought to be your career superpower. Because nobody in the world is like you, because you're unique, we should be able to articulate, and you should be able to articulate how you bring that uniqueness to your career. It will give you an inexhaustible source of energy and deep satisfaction in the work you're doing. Thanks.